Hi, I'm Laura.
Hey, I'm Steffen, and you're listening to Attributed, a podcast library by Dreamdata.
The purpose of it is to store and share all the knowledge that we have gathered across Dreamdata employees through our LinkedIn Lives, podcasts, and webinars.
The typical topics you'll find here can be stuff like marketing,
Sales,
B2B ads,
operations,
social selling maybe. Hi, and welcome everybody to another Attributed session brought to you by Dreamdata. Today we have a panel lined up to discuss something of what is probably one of the most important marketing, like practical marketing activities you need to do when you do B2B marketing. That is making sure that you actually work with the right audiences when you run your ads, when you run your campaigns. How do you select such an audience? Does it need to be your ICP? Do you need to speak with sales? How do you actually make sure that the ads reaches the audience? How do you orchestrate the whole process? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And luckily, it's not just me who have to figure this out. I have some very smart and very like real world experience people here with me today that instead of me introducing them, I'll just hand over the word to you guys, which I'm really thankful that you took the time to take part of this. Liam, can you start out and just give us the 1 minute story about yourself and the work you do at Cognism?
Yeah, cool. It's great to be back again, Steffen. Thanks for having me again. So yeah, I'm the VP of Paid Acquisition at Cognism. Essentially in my role, I have to work extensively with audiences, obviously trying to get the most from our paid spend, manage all of our digital marketing platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, everything else that kind of sits underneath that remit. So I work for Cognism. For those of you who don't know what Cognism is, we're the leading sales intelligence revenue platform for European data. So essentially, if you're in a sales team, a marketing team, or a revenue operations team, ultimately, like we give businesses the ability to gain valuable insights and access to account data or contact level data that helps them build up better audiences and actually prospect and hopefully get better results.
And if, to talk about audiences, I at least chuckle quite often when I see your ads, and perhaps we can get something into about how you decide on messaging for which people and so forth later. Alexei, you want to do a quick introduction to yourself as well?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Alexei Ivanov. I'm the team lead for paid media at Moss. I've been at Moss for the last almost 3 years. And since I've been at Moss, we've really scaled up our marketing channel. And one of the key aspects for us was obviously focusing on different channels, such as like paid search and paid social. And I think audiences are extremely important for us. And Moss, we're a spend management platform. We provide business credit cards and a platform to manage spend. We also process invoices through our accounts payable feature. And for us, we really have to be speaking to the right ICP because we mostly speak with finance folks, and the messaging has to be clear and concise and really chosen to the right audience. So yeah, excited to be here and discuss how we do that. Thanks, Steffen.
Thank you, Alexa. And Mathilde, you're the last one.
Hey everyone, I'm Mathilde. I am part of the demand gen team at Oyster, and our team is mainly responsible for the growth and building brand as well for Oyster in the global employment category, which is still quite new and growing. So mainly I scale our demand performance campaigns on paid social and emerging channels as well. Work really closely with our brand and PMM teams and the sales teams as well on defining our ICP, on making sure that we all reach out the right accounts at the right time with the right messaging. And for those who don't know Oyster, we are a global employment platform and we help companies hire talent anywhere. So say you find a great candidate that you want to hire in another country, but you don't have a legal entity, then we help with that. We also offer global payroll services and global contractor management services. So yeah, that's about us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We should probably start by just getting everybody on the same page. So kind of reaching some kind of shared agreement about when we talk about B2B audiences, what are we actually talking about? Liam, do you want to give the first shot at what's a B2B audience and what do we use it for?
Yeah, throw me in it there, haven't you? So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? So I think I'd always start with like your standard marketing audiences, right? So we work with our revenue team to define historically who has been the best converting, what is the best sort of makeup of an account, whether that's by region, by the segment, Who are the sort of primary contacts that you see in Salesforce? Being people that convert to MQL, the people that convert and keep the deal moving at STRO level, and ultimately who's the final decision maker at close one. But having a real clear idea of who that audience is, and then building out your personas off the back of that is stage one. I think where it gets messy is probably stage two, is like, how do we take those personas and then translate that into the paid media side of things? So a good B2B audience for us is one that takes our existing first party data and then is most accurately reflecting that within all the paid channels from a prospecting perspective, like reaching the right audience with the right message at the right time, including the level of seniority we want to see those ads. And then I guess from a retargeting perspective, it goes even deeper. It's actually then trying to move those audiences throughout the funnel so that we can hopefully drive better return on investment. I think it's just really important to have like all of that mapped out so that you can ultimately like try and deliver better value for the business.
Yeah, that's one good split. At least this one is the, what can you say, the preparation, where you just work without limitations and just stitch together the list. And then step two is then how do we actually deliver our ads in front of them? Alexei, how do you go about building the initial list at Moss?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my definition of B2B audience is simply be who the sales team wants to speak with, right? And usually that's very tight parameters, right? Because sales team wants someone who's ready for a conversation. But in the marketing world, we want to generate leads as much as possible. So we kind of have to balance those out. So initially, how we build those out, I love the scientific approach, Liam, that you kind of outlined in terms of who's converting the best. What we do is and I think that's one of the reasons why we use Dreamdata is that what we do is that we sync Salesforce basically to LinkedIn and Google via Dreamdata. And basically what we want is to be touching the same accounts that our outbound sales agents are going to be speaking with. And I think for me, that has been very crucial because before, how would I usually do it was I would upload manual lists every month, and these would be outdated within a week, right? It would just be like, I'd be like, oh, you're reaching accounts that we have lost or we have pulled in. And it's just like, okay, why are we wasting our ad spend on companies that we don't need to be reaching? And so for me, yeah, just having that ability to sync the the CRM to the platforms is, I think, basically the way we should be working. But I also realized that smaller teams probably don't always have the ability to do that, and that's why I think Dreamdata is important for that, because B2B marketing teams aren't always the biggest. And now I've gone on a big tangent there, but I think that's just the way I kind of view building like B2B audiences, especially how it relates to Dreamdata. And one more thing that I might add is we obviously do like paid search campaigns, and those are very hard to define our ICPs in, right? We're bidding on keywords, we're not bidding on audiences. But I actually, that's one of the things I like about B2B marketing is you can have these multiple different touch points, and then I could see it in either conversation with a salesperson or on Dreamdata that our outbound LinkedIn warm-up campaigns have touched someone who was Googling a certain keyword. And I think that's really where the magic comes to. So yeah, sorry for taking up such a long time there, but I think, yeah, it was just on top of my mind.
Nice. Mathilde, how do you go about like doing the preparation or the textbook work about who gets into your audiences? And you have to align it with sales, or can you just do your own work without speaking with the sales team?
Yeah, no, it's very similar to what Liam and Alex had said. We do make sure that we aligning with our sales team. We have as well like an ABM approach to make sure that we all reach the same accounts. And having worked with Dreamdata through like fueling that list into LinkedIn and other channels been really helpful. But apart from that, when we are trying to do more, not independent, but when we want to find new accounts for our outbound team as well, we would typically look into working with LinkedIn on like not first, the platform data. So making sure that the criteria that we use when it comes to targeting job titles and industries and company size really match very closely to our ICP. But also one thing that I would recommend to anyone is uploading a list of your customers into LinkedIn and building predictive audiences out of that. That's always very successful for us. And also just because you need to use that list to exclude from any campaigns that you run to make sure you're not wasting any ad spend on targeting customers. But overall, we seem to all be using very similar tactics.
Very good one with I have not tried building a similar audience with our customers, but we do also run an exclusion audience to save money on not advertising towards people who are already customers of ours. But maybe we should just drill a little bit more into this. Why is this, like, knowing your audience is so important? Because, like, for me, we have seen drastic improvement whenever we've become better at defining the audience, whether that's inspiration from who is our ICP, or if it's a specific job title that we're targeting, then the messaging needs to change and so forth. So I'm a little bit putting words into your mouth, but Liam, what's been your experience, like practical experience with building audiences, and when does it work and when can it go wrong?
So really good question. We're probably on, like, at Cognism, we're probably the hyper end of like segmentation, right? And what I mean by that is we previously tested job titles. So we worked with sales on like, what are the job titles of people that we really want to work with? We find that it could be quite niche actually, and it's quite limiting. And so we were losing out on actually being able to reach all of the category buyers that can actually influence deals. So we went down the route of targeting departments. So we break out our personas and then we focus on the departments using LinkedIn's targeting. I think Mathilde touched on it there, the account-based approach. So we use Cognism's data and we export all the contact lists, and then we overlay that with LinkedIn's existing data as well. And that gives us better cut through for obviously all of the ads as well. I think where it becomes interesting is we've also broken those departments out into different levels of seniority. And so we engaged our revenue operations team here. And so we looked at the first party data, and then we looked at the job titles in LinkedIn, and we find correlations between the two. And we just completely segmented them out. So we have different messages now towards somebody who we call an IC, who could potentially be somebody who is like an end user, actually possibly a champion. So like entry senior manager. And then we target ICP, which is your ultimate decision makers, where we've got director, VP, and C-suite execs. So, and we found a lot of success in breaking those out. I think one of the key things for us is we really started to use the audience penetration metric at scale. So like, this is obviously quite a recent metric that was introduced in LinkedIn, but we love that because it means that we can start to make better decisions around how we budget. I think where it's become really interesting is we've taken our existing demand gen strategy and we actually overlaid ABM as part of that. And like, we're still relatively new in our partnership with Dreamdata, but what we've really found interesting is like going towards more of a signal-based approach. So Dreamdata allows us to be able to just look at accounts that have a high engagement score and plug that into our Salesforce now. Sales now reach out to target accounts based on the engagement scores. We've done a lot of work around when an account has a signal, what is the conversion rates like meeting book to square and then to close one, when marketing has an influence. And like, we're seeing that we're converting like 5x, 5 times the amount of business that we were before. And I think I'd say top level, it's like the segmentation, having the right message, but then where it's really interesting, kind of where we're going down now is the signals based approach. And Dreamdata really allows us to do that. And like, just pulling in things like firmographics, pulling in certain landing pages, even looking further than that, and like creating custom audiences around the high value industries that we have. And like, then we start to weave those into new campaigns where we kind of multi-thread our marketing campaigns as well. And we're starting to see a lot of success where that's compounding our overall strategy, because we're obviously getting more touch points for those audiences.
A lot of interesting things there, Liam. I was thinking you start with the differentiation between seniority. Why are you doing it? What are you trying to accomplish with like having these two audiences, one with, let's call them junior people, and one with senior people?
Really, there's ultimately like two approaches to trying to get account penetration in B2B. One is top down. It's basically a CEO sees an ad on LinkedIn and then they share it in like your internal Slack channel, and they influence all of the SLT, who then influence the wider team, right? And so you may have spent $1,000 acquiring one C-suite exec, but they've probably influenced like 15 people, possibly wider than that across the org. The other's the bottom-up approach, where you create groundswell, right? You see an account and all we want to have is a trigger. We want to know that they have an explicit need, and oftentimes that will start with somebody performing a hand raise. And for us, a hand raise is booking a demo. We don't actually track any other MQLs because we want to make sure that all of the leads who have hand raised are actually sales ready. Once we get that trigger, right, at the junior level, we then advertise more aggressively to the account level. And then equally so, when we see an exec convert from an account, we try to then multi-thread our marketing to build out more contacts within those existing accounts. So we have the two motions working together to create momentum within accounts. And then kind of on top of that, so like one's the technical part, which is obviously the setup. The second part is actually the messaging. We break out the seniorities because the need of a strategic buyer, so somebody who is speaking to the board, thinking about expansion and improving ROI, is very different to the end user who really just wants to get access to contact data or needs to solve a problem they have on a day-to-day. So like the messaging is so crucial, right? Because we need to make sure that we're having a lasting impact and creating memory structures within those individuals so that when they go away, they think of us ahead of a competitor. And so for us, at least, that breakup, having that real clear delineation between seniorities is definitely proving to be successful.
Interesting. Alexei, do you use job titles as kind of part of your audience building sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes we do, but I also feel like the way we kind of approach LinkedIn is that we want, like Liam mentions, like we want them to remember us. And I think LinkedIn is filled with a lot of ads which aren't memorable, to be honest, sometimes, where you're just like, okay, it's another white paper, it's like another webinar to attend. And so what we've done is, and just to go to specific example, like job titles and stuff, is that I've noticed if we target like mid-level folks in the finance team who are doing a lot of the operations work, and we connect with them on a pain point such as receipt tracking, receipt management, we started doing memes. And these are memes we actually do like in-house, or we let the outbound SDRs do it. And we've seen just the engagement rates are through the roof because it's just actually engaging content connects to the pain point. I think that's actually a really viable strategy. Like Leah mentioned, just to, I've actually remember last year someone mentioned that someone saw a meme and then they showed it to the head of finance, then they showed it to the CFO, and it's just like it became like a bottoms up, like a trickle effect. So yeah, I 100% agree there with being probably a little bit more segmented and with the messaging.
I can testify to the memes one. We've been posting them for fun organically. And the fun thing is that if they take off organically, the likelihood of it being working well in front of an audience is quite well. So we've used it to put it in front of like very cold audiences because it has already demonstrated an ability to kind of generate engagement. Mathilde, anything else on job titles? Are you guys utilizing that in some sense?
Yeah, same. We actually used to leverage seniorities and job functions a lot more in the past, but I feel like sometimes the targeting that you do on LinkedIn just isn't 100% accurate, regardless of how many job titles or job functions you add to your exclusion list. You just always get those bad ones, and your sales teams coming at you asking, why did you do that? And you have to explain, that's just I did my best. It's not supposed to come through. So we actually find out that by using job titles instead of function seniorities drives better lead quality for us. And so it shortens the pool a lot because it's a bit more specific. But then in the end, we do actually drive qualified leads to our sales team. And so when we work with a very small audience, we would consider opening using job functions and stuff. But usually job title is what really works for Oyster. And yeah, so we just have a very strong, this is similar to what Liam was saying. We work really closely with our ops team in analyzing who are the contacts in our Salesforce that are associated with deals, what are the job titles, and just like using that to target, because sometimes you realize that job titles that you wouldn't have thought actually had influenced the deal, and you do need to be speaking with them as well, which is always a very interesting discovery. So definitely do the work of figuring out who is your ICP, but also who are your champions and who is influencing the deals, because that does open your eyes a lot.
Yeah, that's quite cool. Just like very practical. You could probably take the last, I don't know, 50 or 100 deals that you can see you've won in the CRM and just look at the job titles associated with the deal to kind of pick up some inspiration of like who you should be running ads towards. As we're going through this, I realized this very quickly becomes a very LinkedIn specific one because it's the biggest network where you can insert company or like account audiences. So if we just let's just continue down the LinkedIn rabbit hole for a while, because I think a lot of us that's where we will execute our audiences. If we talk exclusions, or how, Liam, you said a little bit, making sure that you have your textbook audience and then you have reality. I think a lot of good stuff can be done with exclusions. When we talk about guarantee, you actually reach the right people. How does the audience exclusion to do look like when you set up something new on LinkedIn?
Yeah, good question again. So what we did at first was we started out, and there's a common theme here. We try and plan out in Excel or on a Miro board what we're trying to do beforehand. And so we were thinking about like what are the go-to-market plays that we want to coordinate with sales. And so before even thinking about exclusions, we thought about the inclusions and then the different tactics we wanted to deploy. But something that come out of that was obviously a really robust exclusion list. So we have a number of different brands that we manage as part of the Cognism group. So firstly, ultimately, like you start with the brands. There are certain brands where somebody's an ICP and we don't want them to be served an ad for the other brands. So ultimately, we use Dreamdata to dynamically exclude certain known contacts or accounts from some of the different brands so that we're not essentially duplicating our spend on one particular account, and we're trying to ensure that we're getting cut through for the right ICP, and there's that segmentation there. For anybody that is ultimately a known customer for Cognism, for example, we exclude them from our brand ads, and that's because we're trying to use all of the budget that we have to try and reach new people, right? Obviously, again, there is a part where that customer base then becomes a positive inclusion as well elsewhere because we've done some work around expansion, right? But that's an entirely separate campaign. So there's different use cases. Something really interesting that we're actually doing at the moment, and which is pretty cool, is Google Ads is a bit of a pain. Right? I'm going to sort of segue into Google Ads here, but Google Ads is a channel that is difficult to scale in B2B, particularly for larger organizations. And so we're taking the Dreamdata contact audience list now. So we built out anybody who's converted to an MQL over a certain time period, and we're actually excluding them from our non-brand campaigns. And the goal there is actually to increase the number of new contacts, right, that actually conduct searches. And the benefit in doing so is just take one competitor campaign. We target the largest competitor within our space, and it's ridiculously expensive to kind of go after all of the traffic. But actually, our goal isn't to win every click, right? Because we have a remarketing setup, which means that once we win the MQL, they then go into this remarketing sort of a pool where we constantly engage them, right? So the goal with Google Ads is everybody net new, right? And so for that particular campaign, we halved our spend, and it means that we can be much more efficient in the way that we prospect, and then we've redeployed spend elsewhere.
Oh, that's super cool. Interesting. I don't know if that's the reference, but Byron Sharp and how brands grow and about reaching as many qualified buyers as possible. Is that true, Leo?
Yeah. So ultimately, right, there's two. I kind of touched on earlier what is a good B2B audience. Similar to what Mathilde and Alexei have said, is making sure your budget's being spent on who sales want to speak to. But even with the budget we have, we've got this remarketing setup, which is anybody who's qualified, get them into this retargeting pool where across all the different channels, we're really being aggressive and constantly being front of mind so that we can build trust so that later on they'll hopefully convert. And then on the prospecting side, it's trying to reach as many category buyers and actually maximize our account penetration through creating new contacts in accounts or reaching new accounts. And something that I find super valuable actually is even when we look at some of the performance on the campaign level in Dreamdata, a metric that I always refer to is, and I think you should build this into the platform, is the cost per contact and cost per account reached, because that then allows me to kind of go back to that principle of the Byron Sharp principle, right? Reaching as many people is, okay, which campaigns are actually serving that goal best? And where there's campaigns where it might not necessarily be, from a prospecting perspective, when we might not necessarily be serving that goal, then we need to either optimize the campaign or we need to think about kind of moving the spend elsewhere.
Very interesting. Just to kind of round the exclusion on LinkedIn off, Mathilde, what's your tricks to making sure that you don't get too much confusion into your campaigns?
Yeah, so we've got a dynamic list of our existing customers that we exclude from all of our campaigns. And we do that at company level because it's much easier to get that match rate on LinkedIn than to use their contacts. And then we also would have a list of like competitors that we obviously don't want to serve our ads to, right? And any big companies like, Google or Microsoft or IBM that we know we're just not the right fit for us. And then we'll have any sort of like job titles or job functions as well that we have seen coming through before. We do have a lot of people that are looking for jobs and do sign up as MQLs. So we try to really exclude those seniorities to avoid reaching out to anyone who's lower level. and that wouldn't be in a decision making for our products. But yeah, it sounds quite simple, but that's about it. Just make sure
Yeah.
you've got the right exclusion and you don't waste too much ad spend.
And Alexei, you got any tricks up your sleeve?
Yeah, I actually don't. I mean, I've been always going with the same exclusions that we don't want to target like junior level interns and stuff like that. So I think we always exclude those, and obviously customers. But my thing with LinkedIn, I think it was already touched upon, was that the targeting is never perfect. You could exclude juniors, and somehow you look at the audience demographics, and what do you know? It's your second biggest audience somehow. So there's definitely some ambiguity to that, but I also think that also allows maybe for broader audiences. Maybe that goes to say that LinkedIn doesn't need to be fully excluded. I don't know, but maybe there could be some broader audiences that could be reached if you're not so entirely focused on the ICP. And I think that discussion around the ICP, you kind of maybe sometimes kind of just do is become this loop where you get smaller and smaller and smaller audiences, and then you're not reaching new accounts, as Liam said. So I sometimes hesitate with doing too much exclusions because I actually do want to reach as many people as possible, as Liam has mentioned. So
That's probably a good rule of thumb as well. Kind of how large do you want your audiences to be, Alexei, normally?
usually like 50 to 100K, but I'm still such a it's still not fully set in my mind whether I want like super small or not, because the campaigns that have had the most success were the bigger ones where I've like not been super strict on ICP.
Yeah.
Because like, for example, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody please on this panel, correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the CEO title doesn't fall under normal ones, they fall under business development.
It does. I don't know.
Correct.
And if you do if you want to target the CEO, you target the whole sales team essentially.
Yeah.
So it's one of those nuances that you have to keep in mind.
I think it's interesting with the audience size as well. You have to think about how the algorithm works, and like the smaller you get, the less opportunities to bid for an auction gets. And if you want to squeeze in exactly between the is it 300 contacts that is the lowest, or something
Yeah.
that size, then you have to pay a premium to hit there, even though you actually don't know whether it's the perfect audience you have set up or not.
Exactly.
I was just going to build on that as well. So we've been guilty of going down the route of being too narrow at one point. And actually, operationally, the challenge that you face is you're constantly changing out ads frequently because you're trying to make sure that, you know, they're not fatiguing and that people are staying engaged. And then that actually becomes a massive timestamp for yourself and your team, just to keep those, you know, new creatives in there, so everybody's seeing a new variation. So I would suggest, similar to what Alexei was saying, like, don't go too niche if possible. Try and keep it a little bit broader. But I think ultimately it also depends on the budget that you dedicate to the campaign, and also what your objective is. For account-based marketing plays, we have some one-to-one plays where ultimately, like, it's a really small audience and we want to basically get everybody in the account who's of value to us to see the ad. So it all depends on what the campaign objective is. But if you're talking broad category level targeting, then I would definitely echo what Alexei said, not go too narrow.
From my kind of exclusion list also goes just from the top of it. Most LinkedIn reps will tell you kind of you can have recent or permanent location, where kind of recent, if people are traveling and they at some point set a foot in Germany, then the next however long period they will still appear in Germany. So you can switch that to permanent. So it's only that location where they're permanently based that you want to be targeting. Then I utilize the size of the companies quite a lot, as we know quite a lot about how big or small we want these customers to be. So I always both kind of include and exclude most campaigns to make sure that the audience hits the right size of customers.
When I
Yeah, go ahead,
go
Mathilde.
back to what we were saying about audience size, it's quite interesting because we actually tend to have smaller audience sizes. I tend to target between 3,000 and 10,000 in terms of audience sizes, because we've done a bit of everything. We've had broader audiences, and I understand what you mean, Liam, about needing to then update your creative so frequently, but I don't know what your frequency looks like in terms of delivery, but ours is still quite low when we had a small audience. And so we just need to like build that up further. We've done some analysis with our LinkedIn team showing that in average, the accounts that we win have 9+ impressions. And so we're just trying to build that impression frequency as much as possible. And when we have an audience that's too big, we end up with a like 1.2, 2.3 impression frequency, which is just really low in the end because you don't know you're not sure what that timeline looks like. So I think there's like, again, it depends on what you're trying to do, but there's a case for everything, I would say.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Is that the Nielsen study that you've done?
Yes.
Yeah, we've had the same study done. But I agree with your point. And just I think it's also, sorry, just Stefan jumping in there. So it's also important to think about what our strategy is. So we've got a demand gen strategy where we serve content through several different buckets to the same audience. So we might have 5 campaigns targeting the same audience. And again, similar to what you just said, Mathilde, we optimize towards that frequency between 9 and 13 because we know that there's a correlation between somebody converting to MQL. So yeah.
9 and 13. Let's just repeat
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, we know that through essentially a year ago, we did going back to the top of this call, like what is an audience in B2B, right? It's somebody that your sales team want to speak to, and it's somebody that fits your ICP. We did that analysis from a regional, an industry, from a segment and a persona standpoint. And we got to the point where we knew that we were too broad at that point. So we really narrowed it down. And then we planned how many campaigns we had live and the different objectives, and we overlaid those based on an underlying audience. Let's just take sales as our one persona. We would have 5 campaigns targeting somebody in sales who's in a senior role. The same would be done across all the other roles, but the goal there was to move from a frequency of like 1.8 to between 9 and 13 because we know that that directly correlated with conversion to MQL. And to echo Mathilde's point, we've seen excellent results from doing this. But I think you need to do the work to have those benchmarks so that it anchors everything that you're doing.
Speaking of benchmarks, there's no Dreamdata benchmarks landing late next week on this topic as well. So stay tuned for that. But I think there's also something super interesting in this that both Liam and Mathilde is saying is that you don't actually need a frequency of 100 for the ad to do its job, which also like I think like sometimes it feels like if I just blink and don't pay attention, suddenly we've reached like an insanely high frequency, and there's always this diminishing return of your ad spend. So in this case, Liam is saying between 9 and 14.
13.
Yeah, 13.
13.
That also means that if one person has seen the ad this many times, then number 14, 15, 16 is going to have less impact. How do you guys work with the monitoring of the audience? Then what are the things that you're studying to keep it effective? Mathilde, you can start.
Oof, good question. Keeping a really close eye on it, and kind of it goes back to changing your ads. I guess once like the impression is quite high and you see that account or your audience not necessarily converting, then maybe it's time to move it to a different stage of the funnel, and maybe they need more educative content, maybe they need more social proof to consider you as a potential product or service. And so it's just about keeping a pulse on what's going on. Are you seeing the click-through rates dropping as well? Are you seeing return going down? And just adapting with content. And one thing that's super key is always having lots of different content and not just sticking with, oh, we're just going to showcase all of our case studies this month and next month all of this. It's just, no, you need to have a lot of different content that serve different purposes for all of your different audiences. Because even if you're trying your best, and that's something I've done in the past, which I've learned doesn't really work, is a narrative funnel is just really, really hard. Like it's like in your head, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to build a big audience pool and then retarget it every step of the way. That doesn't work. It just ends up being very expensive. And I think LinkedIn must have done some studies, and it just shows that people just don't remember like the cadence and don't remember the order in which they saw things regardless. So just making sure you've got diverse content that speaks to different things and addresses the pain points and finds solution and show your USB and social proof, and you should be good as long as you've got a diversity of content.
Nice. Alexei, how do you want to monitor your audiences and their efficiency?
I think that's a tough question for me because I think we are quite search dependent. So I like to think of audiences in 2 different kind of view lenses. So there's like the ICP audiences that you could upload to LinkedIn, and that's the outbound team has the different sales tools that you have different contacts. But for us, it's also search terms. For example, like business credit card search terms in UK, I think, is that an evergreen audience? I don't know. Is it going to be the same people searching? Probably not. So we kind of have like a fresh stream of companies coming in, they're not always going to be an ICP. And so that's why I'm probably like a little bit more hesitant than like Mathilde and Liam to be like super like structured in how we speak to different companies, because we bring in quite a few smaller companies who I don't know if they'll be on LinkedIn. Like like someone who has like a gardening store in Leeds. I don't know if they have a link. I don't know if they have a LinkedIn account. And so that's just the way I see it. I don't think I have a perfect strategy of monitoring how good these audiences are being kind of like capped and stuff like that. I think it's just a slow process that you learn. And it also depends on how big the marketing team is. If it's you and one other person and you want to target like so many industries, it's not possible. Maybe with AI, but I think it's important to shout out that I really love the curated approach that Mathilde and Liam have shown out. But I think also there's other approach for B2B SaaS that are dependent on certain search terms that it's just kind of, I think it's always going to be like a little bit fresher and not something that I'm always like worried about.
I'm thinking if I look back at my life in marketing, one of the guaranteed fails is if we get too ambitious in the like what do you call it, the speciality, or like how granular we want to get with things, because then you realize, oh, it's actually me who's running the ads and I'm busy with doing all the other things. So
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go to this perfect state of targeting. So can definitely testify, Alexei, that's true. I don't know how much you guys do outside of LinkedIn, but if we talk B2B audiences outside of LinkedIn, what do you do there? I guess, like, if I just name a few platforms: Facebook, Google, the ABM vendors, Six Sense, Terminus, whatever they're called. Any of
Cognism.
you guys have some? Yeah, Cognism. How would you say that you're a platform? Can you deliver ads or messaging from inside of Cognism as well?
So currently, the way that the system works is you can export your ABM lists.
Oh, nice.
We will have the ability to execute account-based marketing programs within the platform in the future.
Cool.
So watch this space. But yeah, sort of to lead on to the question. So I'll start with Facebook. I personally don't think that Facebook. I mean, I sing the praise of Byron Sharp and Lesbian A and Peter Field and everybody that you would herald as like the true marketing effectiveness gurus and how to scale brands. But I don't believe that Facebook is really a platform where we're going to get the scale we want. We've seen that when we use the native filters and do prospecting, it doesn't really work so well. And so for us, what we've done with Facebook is we've used it first as a retargeting tool. So when we acquire expensive leads in LinkedIn and we're seeing them engage on the website, high intent pages, etc., we've developed a remarketing strategy that segments them based on the content they've absorbed, based on UTM parameters, so the company size. So because we've got in LinkedIn our campaign set up with UTMs that map towards the different segments. And then we've also done it to certain personas. So we use Facebook really to do remarketing. So we can do heavy lifting for LinkedIn again, right? Keep reminding these users that were there. From a prospecting perspective, we use our own lists. So whenever we launch a campaign and we're going, let's say after a group of accounts in a one-to-many campaign, we'll export all of the contact data. So we've got all the email, phone numbers, etc. We'll import that to all of our different platforms, so LinkedIn, Google, and Facebook, and then we'll use ads to prospect to all of those different accounts. But again, like native targeting for like Facebook, rubbish. If you use a data provider like Cognism, then obviously you've got better quality and you have control over how you deploy the spend. So I think it's just making sure that you've got the right partners. And then for Google, I think a lot of it is similar. It depends on your goals. Like for brand, we've got a certain high intent audience, which is we've broken out our US strategy to kind of two different segments. One is the broader market, and then the second is like our ICP. Using Dreamdata's dynamic audiences, like whenever a contact becomes known and they enter our CRM, regardless of the channel, then we have an audience which is live in our Google Ads campaign for the US, where we like upweight versus those users, right? Because they're higher value to us. Everybody else, we sort of just downweight because we know that we're going to get that traction anyway. We need to qualify them first before we spend more on actually making sure that they convert.
It's interesting. Yeah, we're very similar. We don't spend any prospecting, as you call it, or cold money on Facebook, only just retargeting broadly on those who were on our website. But Alexei, I'm thinking maybe it would be a little bit different for you guys, because I think you can target like business owners or something like that on Facebook. So you probably might, because you can actually use the 5 to 10 employee accounts, right?
Yeah, I think that's always an interesting question on Facebook and Meta. But like before I was at Moss, did 2 years of B2C Meta advertising,
Oh,
so I
okay.
like have quite a lot of experience managing that type of thing. And when I log into Meta now and I look at the targeting, I'm like, what has happened? Has it gone on steroids? Like what's like the target? Like there's so much stuff popping up at me. I'm like, what? Like how am I supposed to target? Like, and then the thing is, the platform doesn't want you to target it. And so what we've done is we've experimented with more narrow audiences, and we've seen that the narrow audiences they do help us in terms of messaging, but it is a tough prospecting channel, even for us when we can target based on certain interests. However, to be successful at Facebook, you have to spend like 5,000 euros a day or something for the algorithms to fully line up in terms
Yeah.
of optimization. So
That's a lot. Mathilde, what about do you guys do any plays on Facebook?
No, very similarly. We have used it in the past for prospecting, and our cost per lead was actually pretty decent, but none of them would like go down the funnel. They just wouldn't convert. So we've stopped that, and we're now considering using it for retargeting purposes as well. We do think our audience probably is on Facebook, because there's so many active groups in the HR space, and we are primarily targeting HR folks. So we think they would be active, but if only we could target based on groups, right? That would be great. Other than that, it's just really tricky.
Yeah.
So no, we know, but yeah, maybe something that they will eventually get to.
It's funny how like both Facebook or Meta or Google, if they just would add an account concept to their platforms, we would be throwing money at them. Anybody who
also,
had any success with Google display ads? We have not, but in theory, you should be able to utilize that as well.
We run quite a lot of display ads as well on Google, and same, we actually do have a lot of traffic, a lot of conversions, but again, those just don't convert down the funnel. So I think a lot of maybe bots are just being fraud and maybe not genuine accounts. But again, I think it's something that could be worth doing for more brand activity. Um, and I'm not as expert on Google, but I wonder, like, is there like a really good and strong retargeting ecosystem there between the different platforms? So YouTube, Google, display. It would be quite interesting if you'd be able to run campaigns across those different ones. I seem to remember you can run ads on YouTube and then use that audience on Google search. But yeah, I think it's still a bit untapped and unclear really what the performance there would be.
Liam, do anybody use like large scale contacts from Cognism and then try to upload them to the ad platforms and then target people?
Yeah, I was about to sort of go into that. So we do that whenever we launch any account-based marketing program. So we upload all of the contact lists to all of the platforms. We're basically, there's a couple of things. First thing I want to go back to is the display piece. So we have display for retargeting, right? Because the idea is that we want to make sure that Cognism's brand is front of mind in environments where we can't reach them, say on LinkedIn or Facebook. So if they go onto an important industry website, Forbes or whatever, then we want to be able to kind of retarget them. So we do that anyway as a matter of course. I think the way that we measure it is really important though. So like we're not trying to get direct conversions from these ads. We're just trying to make sure that we're generating impressions for our target ICP. And then actually we're trying to get people back to the website to kind of feed them back into our traditional retargeting. The way that we use prospecting lists is similar, right? So from Cognism, we create specific account lists with the contacts from within those accounts. And then we point our ads to all of them across the different ecosystems like YouTube, Google search, and then also display ads as well. I think the difficulty you always have is measuring them on an individual platform basis. We tend to look at it from an outcome-based perspective, right? Because if you've got like when we run campaigns and we have like a coordinated approach where we use email outbound from sales, we've got display, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. all in one. At the time, it's always difficult to find a conclusive answer from each of the platforms what's worked amazing. But in the post-campaign analysis, we find that actually in doing that and adopting that coordinated approach, then we have a lot of success. And that's actually one of the things we say to a lot of our own customers. Marketing's there to do the heavy lifting for sales. It's all about broad reach, trying to nurture and warm up those leads so that they're sales ready. And so by introducing as many touch points and getting that penetration as high a level as you can, then you can more successfully do that. What we often find with audiences is some businesses, they try to go way too niche and they try to use an audience only in one place. And then actually like they measure it just on that single platform and they forget to take a step back and think about what were they really achieving, what was the objective, what was the outcome. So I think there's also a piece around audiences and how you measure it. But yeah, to go back to your point, we do use prospect to list to a great extent.
Yeah, it's very problematic, or it's hard at least with these platforms like Facebook and particularly Google Display to do kind of good measurement of it, because at least the way I see it is that the only thing you can really do is like you can do like before and after studies on the geography where the ad ran, and then say, did we then see more leads or more customers come in from that region, if that's the only isolated thing we did to them. But I don't know if anybody else did anything smarter than that.
No, we did the same.
Yeah.
Start lot testing, yeah.
We're flying through the hour here, so all of you start thinking about what is the one or two things that the audience really should take away. Maybe just to kind of, if we are to disclose a little bit, what are the things you shouldn't do when you set up audiences? I think that can be a valuable takeaway to save some money for the listeners. I can start. I'll just throw one in there, and then you guys can go after me. But one of the things where we've really did some not good spend, particularly on LinkedIn, has been when we've been mixing large accounts, like let me call them large enterprise accounts, together with accounts that are the size of like a 50 or 100 people, because the large accounts will just completely suck up all your ad spend. And then instead of you having reached, let's say, 1,000 accounts, then in reality you just reach 50 accounts. And if you send your ads to all these large customers, you risk hitting departments in different kind of countries, and you don't actually get that multiplying effect where it's people in the same team who's seeing the ad who starts to have a conversation with each other about that. Hey, have you seen this brand? Have you seen this ad? If it's if they're set across the Atlantic Ocean and just exposed to ads, then they never have that conversation. So be careful about mixing large and small companies into one batch of ads. That's my mistake or a suggestion for things you shouldn't do. Alexei, you want to lead with a suggestion or things to don't to do?
Yeah, thanks for asking me that one. I think the important part is, and I mean, people can disagree. I don't think you should be too narrow when building audiences, and I think there's easy to get into a trap of where sales is. I want, like, for example, for our cases, sales always wants to speak with head of finance or CFOs, and to reach those people is it's expensive and it's difficult.
Yes.
And of course, I would love to deliver those types of leads to them. It's not like I don't want to, but you have to broaden the horizon. And when we've broadened the horizon, it has paid off for us, especially especially when I've tried out different job functions, stuff like that on LinkedIn. But also, I mean, like there's a different factors there. But ultimately, I would say is don't be too narrow and don't be scared to go a little bit broad and challenge what sales defines as ICP.
Cool. Mathilde, you want to go next with your advice?
Yeah, it's very similar to yours actually, but it's more around regional targeting. Similarly, if you want to target the US and the UK, split them into two different campaigns because your spend's going to go to the US entirely. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And we've also noticed, for instance, our messaging resonates differently in different countries. And while you might think, English-speaking countries will all receive the same messaging, it just didn't work that way for us. So really important to split your campaigns by regions or even countries if you can, and also test different messaging, because something that works in North America will not necessarily work in the UK or even in Germany or France. So that's something that you really want to keep in mind.
That's super good. That actually reminds me that you also need to, also for your budget's sake, you need to split them in 2 regions, because when the day starts, and is it Japan that the day starts? Then if you have everything in the same bucket, then the Europeans will consume your spend. And then when it's people in the US who wakes up, then the spend is already done and you don't get any advertising in the US. So
Exactly.
good point, Mathilde. Liam, you get to give the last advice here.
Perfect. Yeah, just I really like that last point. We do the same as well in our campaigns. It's kind of a middle point actually between what you were saying, Steffen, and Alexei. So I'd always recommend breaking out seniorities, and the reason being is the platforms, and this is all of the platforms. If you give them poor information to act on, they're always going to optimize towards the cheapest conversion. Right. And more often than not, the lower cost conversion actually translates to a lower quality lead. I think the difficulty you have is actually the management side of it. How do you manage your budget across those different levels of seniority? And that's ultimately down to us as marketers to find that sweet spot. But by breaking those 2 different levels of seniority out, you can get a blend of champions or sort of end users, but you can still get a blend of senior decision makers without having your overall blended cost per lead being too high or too low, while also still maintaining quality for the sales team.
Super nice. And to your point, Mathilde, David is writing French will love English ads.
I don't know if that's true. As a French person,
probably the opposite.
yes.
All right, we're done now, guys. But thank you so much for taking the advice to the time to share your advices with me and everybody who's listening. And if you're listening to the show today, go search for Attributed where you listen to podcasts, because you'll find almost 200 more conversations like this there. So hit subscribe, listen, and enjoy them. Everybody, thank you so much for taking the time. We'll cook together a blog post that summarizes everything, and hopefully you people out there learned a bit today. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Bye.
Is everybody?
Bye.
We hope you like listening to us. Subscribe to our podcast and the ones that we have been guests on.
And if you have any feedback for us, just do let us know. And should there be a guest that you think we should be talking to, then pitch us.
We're looking forward to seeing you.